Welcome to the podcast, Giving Back is Dead. We're very pleased to be hosted this week in Art Basel, Paris by Palais de Tokyo for its American year. And we're even more enthusiastic that we're speaking this morning to its president, Guillaume Désanges. Good morning, Guillaume.
Good morning.
We're also joined by Abby Pucker. Abby Pucker is a friend who actually did the first podcast that we ever did with Giving Back is Dead. So I'm very pleased that Abby has once again decided to come back and to continue the discussion. This morning, what we're going to do is Abby's going to talk a little bit about what she's been doing. She's been doing some visionary things in Chicago with her cultural strategy advisory firm, Gertie. And she'll talk about what she's been doing there and who she is and her path. And then Guillaume is going to talk about his path. And we've also asked him to speak a little bit about the general context in France, particularly relative to funding its cultural institutions, and then talk about the specific situation at Palais de Tokyo. And then in the third part, they're going to talk together about what we think we can do at Palais de Tokyo. Voilà. Welcome.
Voilà.
So Abby, as you know, your agency, Gertie, has had enormous public publicity. And it seems to me that this year was the fulfillment of a little bit the work that you've been doing for many years.
Yeah.
But why don't you tell us a little bit about Gertie, how you began to decide to create Gertie, and how it has evolved over the 3-year period.
Thank you for having me, Scott and Guillaume. It's so nice to be here with you in Palais de Tokyo. Basically, we started as an agency because I think when I moved back to Chicago in 2021, I had been living in New York and LA for 12 years. I grew up in Chicago, so it was sort of a homecoming. But then I got back to Chicago and sort of wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and B, what the city needed in terms of its cultural landscape. So I think that the sort of agency model made sense because it was more flexible, and there was a lot of trial and error over the first 3 years. And so by working with partners and clients both in Chicago and outside of Chicago that were museums, that were other kinds of cultural institutions, I think we were able to, in a financially sustainable way, be able to figure out what the best model is and what we wanted to do, because we had clients who were paying us. It wasn't just me trying to produce things with my money or with, grants that we could get, because I wanted this to be an LLC, not a 501c3. Because to me, that's very important to create a cultural institution or a cultural organization that is a for-profit organization, or at least that is more of a hybrid model.
You don't mind if I interrupt you, I hope. This is a discussion, I must admit that you generated a lot of the themes of the whole Giving Back is Dead podcast. We've now done, I think, almost 40 podcasts. And that was one of the themes that you were very clear about initially, which is, and it turns out that all of the, let's call them next generation, like yourself, likes this theme, which is that there must be a revenue generating element.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't just be one isolated major philanthropist.
Right.
And I was impressed with it, and I think that is clearly to me a necessary element of these kind of projects.
Yeah, I think that we've seen what happens when you only have 1 or 3 or 5 large funders. And in maybe Guillaume's case or the case of institutions outside the United States, that's also the state or the city or a municipality. I think there's a huge concentration risk in that. And so, what I've been trying to do is figure out, okay, what is actually needed in Chicago in terms of a sort of cultural organization that can do the organizing of building and stitching together the connections between the galleries, the institutions, but also, most importantly, new audiences that can really support arts and culture in a different way, not just this idea of patronage as we've always sort of imagined it or known it to be, the sort of 20 people that hold up an arts ecosystem in any given city, but how can we actually engage new publics in what we're doing in exhibition making, in participating going to museums, not just having corporate sponsors put a logo on a wall, but actually having their employees show up to museum shows or exhibitions or openings. Because what I saw in Chicago that was needed was more of a sort of center of gravity, and someone to help explain to people what they were showing up to and why they should show up, instead of just sort of assuming, which sometimes we do in the art world, that whatever we're doing, an exhibition or an event or a talk, is so interesting and appealing that of course everyone wants to show up. But that to me is very navel-gazy, and it's not necessarily always correct. So I think that's kind of been the evolution of Gertie, is understanding, okay, what tools can we use to engage people, and who are the people that we want to be engaging? So just to sort of wrap it up, where we've ended up is we are really a platform to support and amplify the work of young, whether that's age or more in terms of experience, and bringing a newness to the idea of curatorial practice. So emerging curators and artists who are thinking about projects that can really spark conversation and be engaging to publics. And then the other side of it is also helping to build that new public and helping to educate and train a behavior of wanting to show up and wanting to engage. I think especially after COVID, it's been very difficult to get people to get up off of their couch or their chairs or wherever in isolation and come and be together in community. Even though that's really what is needed the most, I think it's also very challenging for people, and it's a little bit scary for people, because I think we've lost some of that sort of ability to interact face to face. So that's really what we're doing, is trying to create this platform that both is like a two-sided marketplace, basically, right? It creates the content, so it's figuring out how to support curators and exhibitions in an itinerant way, so we don't have a space. So it's either spaces that were given by real estate developers, or we're doing a show at the Chicago Cultural Center in April, or potentially partnering with another institution and doing shows on site at their space, and then doing the programming that really brings in a new audience that's then beneficial for both the partner institutions and for our curators and the people who are building these shows.
Now, everything I've read, you've had a lot of articles happen this year following Chicago Exhibition Weekend. And everything says it was incredibly successful, and I guess that it was a real progression from the first edition. This was now the third edition
That's
that
right.
You've been doing. So can you give us an example of really how do you measure the success, and what is the impact? And of course, everybody wants to engage the public that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So have you been successful, and tell us more about this.
So first, I'll just start by explaining what Chicago Exhibition Weekend is. So 3 years ago, I had just started Gertie. So again, I was just kind of throwing things against the wall and seeing what's stuck. And Tony Carmen, who ran Expo for many years, is a good friend and supporter of what I've been doing since I moved back. And he came to me and he said, I've always wanted to do more of like a gallery weekend, like a Berlin gallery weekend, or London or Vienna, or I think it's more popular in Europe than in the States. And he said, I want to do it in the fall because the fair moved to April, so I want to do something in the fall, but I don't have the bandwidth. And so I said, well, I have the bandwidth. I mean, we're trying to figure out what we're doing, but I have time and energy, and I can figure it out. So we said, okay, let's do something. So the first year was really kind of, how do we galvanize the galleries around one weekend and create some marketing materials and create some wayfinding materials to really bring new people in who might not know where to go in order to see art, right? We all take it for granted that people are gonna find us, right? Whatever we're doing, if it's a show, if it's a museum, if it's a gallery. But the reality is that a lot of people don't know. So I always tell people, we're not even at the point of like getting butts in seats, right? We're at the point of this is what art going is. It's a step before, you know, it's not like a sports team. Everyone knows who the Chicago Bears are, right? Or the Chicago Cubs, or especially in Chicago, that's such a big sort of behavior of convening and celebrating together. We're at the point of like, this is a gallery. This is a museum. These are the differences between the two. Here's how you engage with them.
So a kind of humility that is unusual in our art world.
I think that's part of it. And I think also understanding that generally institutions, especially in America, want to engage the 0.01%, or maybe even the 0.001%.
Because of the funding issue.
Because of the funding issue. And they're missing, you know, the 0.03%, right? Like the people that come right before that. If you're only looking for people with a, you know, net worth of $10 million and up, you're missing so many people who are at that sort of 1 million to 10 million, right? And even talking about that, those numbers are crazy, you know? That's so much more rarefied than 98% of the world, but that is the world that we're dealing with. You know, whether I'm talking to an art fair or a museum, they're trying to engage audiences by saying, come to our thing, right? Come to our exhibition. They're not understanding that they need to be explaining what an exhibition is. So they're missing that like giant swath of people that they could be engaging because they're too busy not understanding that it's a very small amount of people that actually know what a museum is doing. So I think that's kind of what I've realized. And so we started Chicago Exhibition Weekend because I am hell-bent on engaging that, you know, 0.2 to 0.8, right, percent. We're still talking about a very rarefied world, right? The top 10% of wealth in the world is incredibly rarefied, but it is the world that we're living in, so we have to be realistic as well. And I think, you know, people talk a lot about, oh, are you doing youth engagement? Are you doing, you know, community engagement? That's something that I've realized that I do personally, and I have a foundation, and I fund those things personally. But in terms of my business, I've had to get much more specific on who my audience is, because I really am trying to run a business. And I think there's, at first, when I started this, when we talked 3 years ago, I wanted to engage everyone. And I think I've gotten more realistic about the fact that we really need to focus. So we started Chicago Exhibition Weekend to really engage those folks, right? So to say, you know, are you someone who could one day potentially think about buying, you know, even like a $1,000, you know, piece of work? And so the way that we've gotten to those folks is by saying, okay, here's what a gallery is, here's why you should go, and here's when you should go, because you're gonna be around a lot of other people who, A, are gonna be looking for the same thing, and B, you might wanna meet, and it might be useful for you in your life, whether it's professionally or personally, and you just wanna make friends. So we've gotten to those people through, I mean, you know, digital ad, that kind of stuff, right? Like the social media kind of stuff, but largely through creating assets that other ambassadors that we've tapped culturally, like chefs and musicians and, you know, folks in the business community who really care about the city and care about investing in culture, can then share with their networks.
I see.
And so the content that we create is really about being able to share something with some context, not just invite your people to this, because when people invite someone to something that they don't know about, the chances of them attending are very low. But when someone says, hey, come to this event, this is what it's gonna be, and you're very clear about what people are gonna walk into, I think the likelihood of people showing up is much higher when we don't assume that people know what we're talking about all the time. So Chicago Exhibition Weekend is that. So we're basically creating this one weekend with a lot of programming that has content that explains what it's going to be, that we have maps, we have a whole website for it, and we're very intentional about, talking about who we're speaking to and why. And this year, I think it was really successful because we got even more specific in having a central place where there was an exhibition that was happening, that we were really able to do a lot of press around, because press also understands a specific event much better. Exhibition. We did programming with Independent Curators International, and then we had a book fair in the same building that was zines and prints and editions and things that were much lower cost, so that we were blending audiences that were coming to that space. And then once we had them in that space, we had materials that said, okay, now go out and see the rest of the city. Go to this gallery, or take this specific route that we've curated for you, or that this chef that you love and follow has curated for you. And so we've created really this kind of physical hub, but also a hub of information and of content that is explaining, yes, what sort of the exhibition that you're seeing is, but more importantly, like how this exhibition relates to the rest of the city and why you should care about it. And so now, by doing it 3 years in a row, I think we've established some sort of consistency. So now people understand, okay, in the fall, there's going to be this big weekend, and there's going to be lots of art stuff going on. And that's people who are not necessarily in the art world.
And do you have any statistics of what's happened this third year? And because also everything said that you were able to engage these younger generations. How do we know that?
I don't know. I think statistics at this point it's a little bit early for statistics still, right?
But you have this impression that it was.
Well, I think that it's an intimate thing, right? When you have like a weekend where you have maybe 5,000, 10,000 people passing through a place or passing through galleries. I mean, yes, we should get more statistics. We don't have very precise statistics, but I think a lot of what people were referring to is that this year we did a specific curated weekend pass for people who were both based in Chicago and not based in Chicago. And that was basically a 3-day immersive experience in sort of the greatest hits of Chicago in terms of our cultural space. So it was almost like a museum board trip.
I see.
But we did it for people who were not necessarily on boards, but wanted to come and have this experience. So again, it's sort of like flipping this assumption on its head of, or this, I guess, behavior on its head of, you have to have already committed tens or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to an institution in order to get access to a trip. We're saying, well, that feels silly. Travel and experience is clearly the way that most people, especially this next generation, want to engage. Yeah. And so why would we create a hurdle for them that they have to already know that they want to be involved in an institution? Let's actually make this an open experience where you can really understand what this world is about through a 3-day immersive, almost boot camp, right? Or people described it like summer camp. Like it was 40 people together doing lunches and dinners and collection visits and, studio visits together, and really understanding what the art world is and learning about different connections through conversation with people that they started to become comfortable with over the 3 days. So that's what we did, and it's part of the way that we funded our exhibition, was through the fees that people paid to come on this weekend.
How much did they pay?
It was $3,500 for the weekend.
So it was
without hotel, $5,500 with hotel, and then for members of our membership organization, which is called Early Work, it was $2,500 without hotel. So we were engaging people at
who had some means,
at different levels, but again, it's still this, 0.2 to 0.1%, right? Or 0.02 to 0.1%. And that's what I'm saying is you can't expect someone who is, only has the capacity to spend $1,000 a year on art to buy a $5,500 weekend somewhere. Yeah. So you have to figure out who you're talking to for each of these different things. The rest of Chicago Exhibition Weekend, 95% of the activities are free.
I see.
And open to the public. So that's
that was
really,
like a feeder.
Exactly.
I see, for
it's
this.
like we're creating our own pipelines for these different kinds of things. Our membership in Chicago, Early Work, that's a year-round membership. That's $55 a month or $600 a year. And that's 2 events every month. So my colleagues...
And that was what you began with, if I remember correctly, wasn't it?
Yeah,
you wanted to create a community.
Yes, exactly.
And you found people to meet.
Well, and first we did it for free. We did these things for free to see if there was even interest. We published a book, and people bought the book, and then through that they could be invited to events that we were doing. And now we've progressed to, okay, we know that people will pay for this, but it's a different audience that's going to pay $600 a year for this membership, and that's a little bit of a stretch for them. But we want to make sure that they feel like they're as important and as valuable as someone who's going to be able to pay $5,500 for a 3-day immersion, as important as someone who's going to pay $10 million for a work of art, right? All of these people are important based on the context of the activity. So that's really what we're trying to create.
Okay. So Guillaume, what I would like, if you don't mind, would it be possible that you talk a little bit about yourself and how you arrived at Palais de Tokyo? And then also, if you can talk a little bit about I think that most of the people who listen to Giving Back is Dead are perhaps not aware of the context in France in terms of funding and the constraints of funding its cultural institution. So maybe you could do a little bit of both for us.
Yeah, thank you. Well, there are always several paths who bring you in a certain space, a certain place like Palais de Tokyo. I would say that first of all, I was a spectator of the arts. I never studied art. I was never to the university. Then I totally autodidact, as we say. And then I was a spectator of contemporary art, especially. And I didn't understand contemporary art. And I was attracted maybe because I didn't understand it. And I try now that I'm president of a big institution not to forget where do I come from and continue to address to those persons who are not specifically used or not specifically socially used, for example, to go. Because going into a museum to go to art is also, all know that there is a kind of social determination that also, but as you said,
not so different than what
Abby
is
just
saying,
to know
basically.
that it exists.
Right.
First,
yeah, just to know
and
it exists.
Then I come from that, and I was so curious. But contrary to other people, I was always attracted by what resists me, and art continues to resist.
What resists you?
Yeah, what resists me. You know, right? What is continual resistance? Because you don't master art, you don't grab art. Art is what gives you something that you don't expect, especially contemporary art. You are not going to see art to verify something or to celebrate something you already know. You go into the uncertainty of what is art, because the art of today and the art of tomorrow opens new doors. So it's not a comfortable situation, I would say. And I don't want this comfortable situation when I go to art. So I came from that. And then I began to go to see shows, and a little by chance, a little by will, a little and a lot by desire and love. I began to write about art. Then I was invited to make small exhibitions. And then I was, for 15 years, independent curator. That's also why I know what is a small company, because I was independent. So I know what is the economic situation in the art, which is not easy for the artists. There is also the social part of art, which is important. And then I was independent curator. I worked in several perspectives. One was to experiment in the format of the exhibitions. So being able, and it might be very helpful in this context today, to be able to make a show whatever the resource you have. So to invent with the resource you have. Small shows. I did a lot of conference performance, which I consider as curated exhibitions, but with the voice, for example. a lot of writing, teaching, and I began to make larger and larger exhibition in institution. So I know institution from the inside, but several different institutions. And for 10 years, I was also artistic director of La Verrière Hermès. So La Maison Hermès, Hermès company has 3 galleries in the world and 1 in Brussels, which is the original one. And I programmed this space for 10 years. And in 2022, I applied at Palais de Tokyo, which is, of course, a very large institution, the largest institution in Europe of contemporary art. And I thought it was a good time for me, with all this experience I had as an independent curator. And my idea was to have a little more time, more vision of perspective of the future. And this is something we could talk about, this question of the schedule of art with a renewal, permanent renewal, especially when you're independent curator. You do a lot of one-shots, and then it's difficult to put seeds or grains that will grow, because a project is done and then you have another, totally different and so on. So it was high time for me to imagine what will be to shape something in the space, but also in the time. And that is why I applied at Palais de Tokyo as the president of Palais de Tokyo, which is a specific thing in Paris, that you are at the same time artistic director and general director. So you are, it's really an ensemble. And this was important for me, because for me, everything is important. I am not let's say, a super curator, and I have also to deal with the institution. All that for me is the same. And it was very important for me, because when to tell you the truth, when I was more recognized as a curator. I thought maybe being part of the side of the arts, more than the money, more than the organization, more than the management. And when I applied, a lot of people, oh, now it's wonderful, but then you'll have to cope with the administration, to cope with the management, to cope with the money. And I said, no, for me it's the same. It's important that it's a global project. And this global project is important because for me it is like curating the institution as a general. And this is important because art is important. Art is the core of what we do. We work with artists, we're a place of art. But we are also a place of mediation. So what we do with art, what you do through art is as important as the art piece itself. Even with the artists, how we produce with them, in what frame we invite them. So all that is part of the thing. And then my project for Palais de Tokyo that I wrote for my application, which I try every day with all the teams of Palais de Tokyo to make alive, to make real, to make concrete, was called permaculture institutionnelle. Permaculture is something that comes from agriculture. So it's a very, almost not revolutionary, but a very innovative way of imagining agriculture, taking nature as a model, not something you must fight against, but as a model, and to follow a reasonable and durable way of producing. This idea of permaculture was about ecology, because I thought that ecology was a very interesting, not problem, but very interesting issue, very interesting thing to tackle with. So not a negative thing about the end of the world, but it was okay, what is it the occasion to work differently and to go back maybe to what is more important for us from the beginning. Of course, we don't do real permaculture at Palais de Tokyo. It's not that we are in the middle of Paris in a very urban way. But to be inspired by the principle of permaculture and to be able to, in a way, transform them into an institutional thing is very absorbing. Not easy, very difficult sometimes, not easy, not obvious sometimes, but for me, it goes in the right way.
It seems to me there's a little bit about what Abby is doing with Gertie.
Exactly.
She is doing a permaculture. It sounds to me, it's very similar.
Yeah, it's interesting as you're talking about the permaculture and the ecology in this language. It's funny because maybe in the arts, people are sort of like, well, what is this? And it's kind of like untraditional. But the rest of the world probably understands the world, or the word ecology or ecosystem more than they understand a term related to contemporary art.
That's true, that's true.
But we don't think about that, so it's like, oh, this is such a new idea. It's a new idea for a very small group of people that we tend to spend a lot of our time with.
Exactly.
So I just think it's really smart, and I think it's very interesting, but I think it also takes people who haven't necessarily come from being steeped in art forever, for their whole career, their whole life, to understand that actually this is maybe a more relatable way of talking about an institution and telling the story of what an institution does than using the normal language about art.
Exactly.
And I think it's also relevant for the next generation. They're particularly interested in this kind of concept, I think.
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, you can see it's a question of generation, that the ecological issues are and we understand why. It is totally normal that their future, when you are 20 or 30 years old, it's not the same as the future of someone who's 60 and 70. That's why I think as in Palais de Tokyo, we have to hear from the young generation, to hear, and to, more than hear, to learn from them, because they have very good ideas. And it is also a question of humility that you say. You said about humility with AB. And humility is interesting because, sorry, I cannot resist to say that humility comes from humus, etymology, which is the earth, the humus. Humility comes from that. So I like also the side of humility. Mm-hmm. And humility doesn't mean to be weak. No, humility is a strength. Humility is a very good, positive thing. Humility just means that you just look around, that you're not alone. You are not in a. You shouldn't stay in a domination or in dominant position, but you must work collectively. And humility, as you said, AB, is also do not take for granted that everyone is waiting for you and what you do is the best and everyone will come, etc., etc. Especially in our case in Palais de Tokyo, because we have a place for mission de service public, service public. So we have a mission to share the arts or the stakes of the arts to the maximum of people. It doesn't mean everyone, but the maximum of people. And we must have the humility to say that it's not easy. It's not easy for many reasons in the social world.
But let's go back. I think what I would like to do is let's talk again, because giving back is dead, is how we continue to support the arts. So we have to go to the less sexy part of how is it funded. I'd like you to talk a little bit about the difficulty in France funding its cultural institutions.
It is not less sexy. It is not less sexy. Everything is sexy. And it's very difficult sometimes to make understand, especially for Americans.
That's why I think it's important.
The model is so different.
That's why I think it's important.
Yeah, Palais de Tokyo is a little special but in this way. But
first talk about the general context and then Palais de Tokyo situation.
So the general context is that I would say after the revolution.
Yes.
So 18th century, but especially after the Second World War, there was a very important national policy around the arts.
I said Louis XIV. I don't know if you read.
Yeah,
I was quoted.
Exactly.
I was quoted in the art newspaper the other week.
Yeah,
on the difference between London and Paris, and I actually said it begins with Louis XIV.
I mean, art and culture is part of the general politics in France, state politics.
State politics.
State politics, meaning that all the almost all of the museums are funded by the state. It is funded by the state.
All of the larger institutions.
Out of nothing, not out of nothing, out of collections existing sometimes. So it was very important. You have to understand that the French Revolution was really about art also.
Yes.
You imagine, and after the Napoleon and the empire was also very linked to art. So I mean, one of the first decisions after the revolution was to make the Louvre, who was a Palais Royal, public for the arts. Yeah. And then, and after that, there was the art in Paris, and after that, after the revolution, and especially after even through the 19th century and 20th century, to have really this policy of local museum everywhere, because it is a political issue about sharing the arts to the broader audience. It's a question of cultural democracy. So this is it.
And I've talked extensively. I mean, as you know, I worked 10 years with Centre Pompidou, and I talked extensively about the fact that the people who have grown up in, let's say, the classical leadership educational system, they believe the state should pay.
Exactly.
The mentality is they've gone into the statement and the state should pay.
Exactly, because the state is paying anyway, and Centre Pompidou is a name. Pompidou.
Yeah.
It's a name of a president de la République.
Yeah.
So we name our institution from president. Musée Jacques Chirac, Musée Pompidou. So you have this part of the state. Then it was like this since the last decades, let's say, all around the 19th century and until now. And now there is issues about that. Why? Because the state has also its economical issues.
Yes. And they
It
kind
is
of
a big budget to, of course, give money to all the museum and so on. And that's true that today it is asked to the museum to go more into private money, but always as a kind of double thing. So we are asked as institution to find money, to find other resources. Not that the state wants to withdraw completely, but the state cannot give more. And as you know, we have, of course, growing charges, making exhibition.
I'm rather pessimistic about the future because obviously the European countries, France included, is going to be forced to devote more of its funds to increase its defense budget and social budget.
It's part of the thing. Although the budget of culture is around, I don't know, something like 1% of the general budget, it's not so. But then still, it is.
But in all these contexts, the first budget that is decreased is the culture budget.
Yeah, that's the point.
So talk us a little bit about the situation of Palais de Tokyo, which is even more fragile, I would think, relative to the state. You receive less as a percent of your budget from the state than the other institutions.
Exactly. I wouldn't say it is more fragile, actually.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, but it's exactly.
You receive something like 40% from state funds, right?
Yeah, more or less, yeah, more or less, yeah.
And
a
probably,
little less, a little less.
And probably something like the Louvre or Centre Pompidou is probably 75%.
Yeah. You have to take that, but yeah, that's true. That Palais de Tokyo from the beginning. The idea of Palais de Tokyo that the let's say public subsidy, the state subsidy was a small part of it. Just, I would say, for the what we call the comment ça s'appelle
Subvention d'État?
Non, je veux dire les coûts fixes.
The fixed costs.
I mean, salaries
the fixed costs.
buildings.
The operational budget.
Yeah.
The fixed operational budget.
Okay, the fixed, yeah. So it was covered, not even the fixed budget.
Yeah.
But then from the beginning, there was this idea that the Palais de Tokyo as a new space, because it was created in 2002. So it was also a challenging thing of, let's try to make something different. And because the state hadn't
Which is what is interesting.
Yeah, it is
I think this is why you are here and what gives an opportunity.
Exactly. And then from the beginning, there was the idea that this space had to find something like 65% of its budget to
every year.
Every year. So that is why, from the beginning, there was a huge dialogue made with companies, private partners, Société des Amis, friends of Palais de Tokyo, patronage, but also privatization of the space that we do a lot, fashion weeks that we host, restaurants. So to find money. And when I say that it's not a fragility, I thought it was a fragility before arriving at Palais de Tokyo. And it is in the general mind that Palais de Tokyo is fragile because that the state subsidy is only a small part of it. But the more I was inside, and now after almost 4 years there, I think that it's not such a fragility, that it may be part of the stability. Why? Because we don't have only one foot, we have 2 feet.
Diverse.
We have 2 feet, the diversity. And you know that, maybe it's in the business world, that it's always good to have...
Which is what Abby was talking about.
So for example, when there is a fragility with the subsidies of the state, which is already the case today with many art centers, many museums, many theaters in France, then in Palais de Tokyo, we have a little more stability because we know we have the private part.
And you've already been engaging the private sector.
Yeah,
so you already have an experience
overnight.
in doing this.
Exactly, overnight. But then, and secondly, it is when it is the contrary. For example, the COVID. The COVID was terrible for us because, of course, we cannot do fashion shows anymore, we cannot do privatization, etc. Of course, we did a little, we tried to find online thing, but and then in that case, the state was here. Because we are a state. You know, the question of maybe you have to understand that in France, the question of the relation to the state is not only money. The state is giving us a mission. The state, I am appointed by the President de la République, by the President. We have one tutelle, the Minister of Culture, we are the Minister of Culture. So it's not only to be subsidized between others, that we are founded and created by the state. Without the state, we don't exist in a way. And it is the case of Pompidou, of Centre Pompidou, it's the case of all the museums. So it's not only a question of subsidy, it's a question of identity. And this is sometimes difficult that people to understand that it's not only that we have the state as a partner. No, we are the state. We are founded and created by the state. So this is important, and we have to acknowledge that. And we have to be agree with that, because it's very important. And this is why also we have to think our mission as a state mission. So we have a political mission in the way, because the state gives us some guidelines. Very clear, and at the same time open. Promote contemporary art. So being the support of contemporary art and artists, and especially of the French scene. Then spread and develop that and giving that to the more audience. And then also being able to show the diversity of creation. You know, we have those kinds of guidelines which are given to us by the state. So we don't in a way choose our mission, but we choose the way to do it. So we have a kind of very large freedom in the programmation and what we do. But then those guidelines are guidelines we have to follow. And I'm very happy to follow them, because I consider myself as almost a civil servant. Subtle, because I'm not a civil servant, because we are juridically company, but we are a company, private company owned by the state.
Yeah. So obviously what I wanted to talk about today, now we're getting to the next part, which is how can we continue to help to give some greater diversity to the funding of Palais de Tokyo. One thing I'd like to say once again, that I hope it did not get lost, it is the largest institution in Europe for contemporary art in terms of the square footage that is available for, so that I think is important. I don't think people understand clearly that it's really the largest institution in Europe for contemporary art.
Do you have a collection?
No, we don't have a collection. That is important also. We don't have a collection. So we are totally and 100% dedicated to creation.
I think that's important.
I think it's very important, creation. And I think given this, the fact that it doesn't have an overwhelming state support, given that it has someone like Guillaume, who is its president, it offers enormous opportunities to try and think of new models of support, which is the whole purpose of what I want to help.
Yeah, because the fragility is not the fact that we have to fundraise. The fragility is today the situation of fundraising and patronage, especially in France.
No, I think it's everywhere, but it's maybe a little, it's everywhere.
But as you know, because I listen to your podcast, dear Scott, which I learned a lot from, there is some differences. And for example, in France, we have some big companies, and especially in the luxury field, in fashion and luxury field, who has also their own institution, which is maybe different from other parts of the world. And also we have less, I would say, individuals patronage in France. And I think it is a pity, because there is a lot of interesting people who could be interested in participating, but we don't have this culture of giving, of participating into the art with your own money as a collector, for example. So
But you have a lot more, I think, just anecdotally in how it feels, participation by people, not art patrons, not like by audiences.
Yeah. I mean, that's what you felt when you were here last night.
Yeah, that's what I've felt that in every institution that I've been in, whether it was, here or in London, because it belongs to the people in a very different way. That's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily help your funding issue in the immediate present, right? Because again, there's these different audiences.
Yeah.
But it is very interesting, I think, the trade-offs that we make. In America, art, because it's private, is seen as something for a very specific class of people.
Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting...
Yeah.
In the funding, we're talking about funding, it's not necessarily, okay, that's like maybe not as helpful, but in terms of sustainability, if you have all these people who feel like culture and art is a part of their life and that they are entitled to that as a citizen of this place, that's an interesting thing for you to be able to work with, as opposed to where we're at in America, which is it belongs to the wealthy, right? But then you have a concentration risk again. If you don't have people coming and you don't have people who feel like they have to take care of it and invest in it, and that's only a very small group of people, there's different challenges to both of those situations. So as you say, it's an opportunity as well.
Sure.
I think it's an opportunity, because I think that that it basically it means that the people that you can engage, they already have greater familiarity with it. But it also means that they think it should be free. They don't. That's the other part of it. So that's really what I wanted to discuss: is do you have ideas as to how can you continue to diversify the source of funding for this incredibly fascinating institution, which is Palais de Tokyo? What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about the kind of model of what you've done in Chicago?
My thoughts?
Yeah, what are your thoughts? Because it seems to me that it could easily be adapted to having like Palais de Tokyo as its center and develop a similar structure.
Yeah, I mean, but you have a lot of the things that I'm trying to build and do, right? You have a really engaged and loyal audience. I mean, that is a question, I guess. I don't know. What is the sort of rate of return of people who are coming here? Do they come for every exhibition? Are they coming once? Are they like, do you have an idea of that?
Yeah, we have an idea because we do a lot of, we spend a lot of time and money to have this observatory of what is our audience. It's also something that is asked by our ministry to know who is coming. Personally, my main motivation is not the final figure, the final, let's say, frequentation.
The number of entries.
But who's coming?
Right.
So less quantities and quality. And this we do a lot, especially, and this is why we can go through our invention of the relationship with the companies and with the patrons. For example, for me, it is important to see, okay, who's coming? I don't think it's a democratical thing to have, I mean, I don't know, like 200,000 people more if they are the same people. So how we talk with the diversity. And with the place we constructed, for example, Le Hameau, with a place for inclusion, mediation, and education through art. We do a lot of things, which cost a lot of money, but we do a lot of things specific. For example, I take one example about mental health and neurodiversity. We include a lot of people who have like so-called disabilities, which often are not disabilities, are just difference, let's say, just a difference compared to the norm. So, for example, those kind of projects, and this is where I totally agree with Ebi about, okay, let's invent things. Now we have in this situation, how we can invent. And for example, what we invented at Palais de Tokyo is something which is not, you give money, and then you have back, I don't know, a kind of party and a logo on the poster. We know all that it's over. Not over, but it's not the future, let's say, at least. Then how you can have a mécénat initiative, patronage. So how we can create things together. I like very much AB, and this is very, maybe you may not be aware of this, but very ecological when you say about the necessity. To invent what is a necessity. You don't do the same as the other. What you did in Chicago is that, okay, what is needed here? What is needed? And then what is needed, for example, for us is, okay, we have to invent new ways because the patrons, individuals or companies, they want to be part of a project, of an ideological project as the same as art project. Art is not just one thing separated from the rest. So the values we share together. And this is why we created two circles. So circle, it's not the patron, it's circles. About one is art and ecology, and the other is art and society through the idea of inclusion. And for those, through the idea of inclusion, with our partner, we invent programs together, exactly what you do in Chicago. And I can tell you, for example, with one of our partners, Ruinart, the champagne, brand of champagne, we created a project which is very important for us, which is a prize for production, ecological production for the artists. Because as you said, a lot of artists don't know exactly what to do with the ecological issue. Then we make a very precise and sharp and high level free formation for being trying to find ecological ways of producing art toward the artist. So this is one thing that we construct together. And of course, they also give money for the institution, but not on one show with a logo. They give to the institution as a whole. And then we also create programs together. So this is
they participate in the decisions relative to the program.
Yeah, and it's not making decisions. It's literally think together, construct together. What is needed?
Together.
It's really co-creation. That is the idea. And then it's more a question of dialogue, of exchanging resources. They have resources, financial resources, of course, and we should talk about that also.
Also alcohol.
Also. But also, they also have kind of resources. They can think. They have their vision as a company. One of the company, for example, helped us to do our carbon assessment. Company today, and it was a very, very long-term, like 2 years almost, 1.5 years project of how to find a way to have a real carbon assessment. And they help us to develop this project. So it's more accompanying them. And we also can offer a lot of things in the arts. Because in the art, we are the champions of inventing.
Yeah, inventing.
We are the champion of sharing things, of doing a lot of magical things with
nothing. The kind of flexibility that does not exist in the other cultural institutions that I know.
Exactly. So it's really a kind of going together around this. And this is also, I think, what you did in Chicago.
So Abby, how can we think of any kind of intersection that we as Americans can do to be involved in supporting an institution like Palais de Tokyo? Is there any new ideas we can think about with them?
Right now on this podcast? No, I mean,
well, I'm thinking like this Chicago weekend. I mean, basically, there are lots of things similar to this that happen here. And one thing they're thinking about doing a Paris biennial, for instance. And the Paris biennial would have as its headquarters, I think, Palais de Tokyo. So, that's something, that same kind of construction that you did in Chicago. I'm not sure. Why can't it be the same demographic that you're touching in Chicago? It can be the same demographic here in France and maybe in Europe.
Yeah, but if you're talking about funding, that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
I'm talking about engagement, right? So
Isn't it related, funding and engagement?
Yeah, but that's a longer term project. I'm trying to figure out what that looks like and tinker with it and modify it. I think travel and experiences are really important. And I think exchange with people from different countries is also very important. So, I mean, even, having a show with an, American curator is gonna bring people and bring awareness and bring interest to Palais de Tokyo, right? Like, I think that is where you get the opportunities for exchange and resources and exchange, for awareness and broadening the network in the community. Haven't you seen more interest from people in the States because you're having these American artists and you're having Naomi?
Definitely. Actually, we met this year around that project. For us, it was very useful to just understand how it worked in the US. So we could first, one of the things, dear Scott, that we could just exchange about experience of what they're doing. We can learn a lot from each other. I think we can learn a lot from the American landscape, especially with projects like Gertie and what Abby is doing about this question of personal initiative of patrons and collectors to be active. Because what is maybe something that is not anymore efficient is the idea of the passivity.
Yes.
The passivity of the donor. We
You're
donate,
right.
and then just donate.
Right.
Just gesture.
This is
as if I donate and it's no. people want, it's not
They
a
want
question.
engagement.
Yeah, engagement. And engagement doesn't mean, and I want to be clear on that because there are sometimes controversy about that. It's not about determining the programmation of Palais de Tokyo. I mean, we know what we're doing. You like the show, you don't like, but we have this kind of expertise. And if the companies can also have a point of view, they can have the patron, but everyone can have. Our audience also can have a point of view. But for example, it's not around that. But engagement, engagement about how we do the thing, what kind of thing we propose, not as a programmation of artists only, but in the general issue. For example, we would love to have more initiative coming from our patrons, like proposals. You know, artists are creative, everyone is creative, and we know that patrons can be creative. And sometimes they don't dare so much, maybe asking, because they think that the model is that. We had a discussion with AB before around this idea, for example, of the gala, dinner gala, which maybe is a model that everyone does since a long time, but it could be updated in a way.
It has to be done in a different way. It
Yeah.
has to be done in a different way.
Yeah, so it has to be. And think about, okay, what means a dinner, for example? Maybe a dinner is not a dinner. It is not only being seated and eat something together, giving money for this dinner. It's about engaging on a specific event, together, which is also has to do with what you do inside. And for example, if you take that just on this level, then you can find other way. That's what we thought that it could be more, I don't know, artistic, for example, like concerts, or maybe you say that also with what kind of price do you can be engaged, and you can be engaged at different levels, or maybe not only one, I don't know, like something like, I don't know, 10,000 plate or seat of a table, but then what is people can give, I don't know, less than that, 100, 500, another more, but engage all those community together. So finding a format, which I didn't even precisely know what it is, but a format that could have the same impact of we are part of something, we show it, and we show our interest, and we have a nice evening or a nice moment. So this is something that we could imagine, and I would be very happy that also it's constructed with the patrons themselves, because we know what we need, what we want, what we would like to experience, but it could be also nice to hear what the patrons also would love to, to dream together or something.
I also think philanthropy is very localized, right? You give to your local museum, or you give to the things that immediately impact you in your life, right? But I also think in an increasingly stratified world, we also have to find ways to come together, not only by geography, but also by things that we care about. So I think creating connections between institutions or between organizations that are in different places but care about the same things and want to talk about the same things, we also need to, your success is my success, right? Because we're aligned ideologically and spiritually and ethos-wise. So how do we create that connection also through funding, right? And how do we bridge people who care about the same things in Chicago and in Paris, and make sure that they feel responsible for each other's strength and each other's survival, and for each other to thrive. I think
this is
that's
what
really where it is.
basically has been the story of my life. I have been working on this cross-border philanthropy, and that's what I believe. I believe this is a way that we can talk to each other, and we don't only look for our local community, but we also want to have a global community.
Yeah, I mean, it's also a way to resist.
Absolutely,
right?
It's a way to resist.
It's a way to resist geopolitical
Instability.
Whatever
Instability.
that we feel helpless about, or
Yeah.
we feel we can't control.
You're right. I felt incredibly.
But you can build personal, individual relationships,
exactly.
and that's a way to resist what everyone else is trying to do, which is divide.
It's also apropos, that he had a formative period of his life having gone to Chicago.
Yes, I know, we talked
That
about
was also.
yeah.
That was
So,
also.
Well, I mean, that's really why we are where we are right now. That's how we've got here. Is we
Exactly.
had breakfast in Chicago at Doma.
Yeah. So I like this idea of having a common ground, which is a kind of being localized, but not geographically, but ethically, like ethical ground that can also go through the oceans. And
Right.
but then, of course, this ground, and this is exactly what happened here. It's not totally by chance, maybe, you know. I was very influenced by Chicago. So the influence is very important because 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, I was invited by Tony Carmont, our common friend, in Chicago. And Tony did a lot for that, to make an exchange program of curators with Naomi Beckwith. And that is where I discovered Chicago scene. I have been before, but then I had a little more time. And I created a project of residency program with Theater Gates, within the Theater Gates, which was, so all that was, it was more or less the same, creating for what is needed. And I said, you know, what is needed for me is that to bring some French artists into the core of Chicago, because it will be very important for them to understand what it is. But I was also, I would say, ambitious enough to think that the presence of French artists there could be interesting for Chicago too. And then this is a real exchange. Again, not again only one, okay, then I give you money to be there and then you take advantage of it. So it's a common interest. And that is why I choose precisely the artists I sent to Chicago, because I knew that they had something to take, but they had something to give. So this is very important. So it was really
a real exchange.
A real exchange. And that's what happened. And we still have traces of that now. You know, Julien Creuset, with an artist that I invited, is now in a gallery in Chicago. Document, and you know, and now he brought also Chicago here and so on. So we are all that. And then the exhibition today at Palais de Tokyo, which is maybe the biggest exhibition we've done since I'm here, a real carte blanche, a whole takeover of Palais de Tokyo, is based on that. You see how 10 years ago we planted seeds that come again, and then now Naomi Beckwith, who is became a friend, but also it's a kind of friendship, as you say, of relationship. Not friendship just for friendship, but friendship based on these ethical, ideological, artistic ideas that we share together, the values we share. And the exhibition that is here is, for me, a perfect example of this international grounded relation, because it is about, it has so much to do with France, so much to do with the context, so much important to show it here and now, and so much linked to the US, and so much meaning also for Naomi to see. That is why also I'm very happy that for the first time we had so many patronage and sponsors from the founders from the US. Not because only it's Paris, blah, 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 but because it is a show that is really creating I don't know, a real link between the two. And it's a real invention. It is not based on the, I don't know, like the end of a research. No, it's a creative process, because the show itself is a creative process.
So I would say we're already doing it, is the answer also to your question, right? It's like, what can we do to support Palais de Tokyo? Well, look at how many Chicago-based names are on the supporters list, right? It's already happening through the relationship that Tony Carmont seeded 10 years ago. And now, you know, we've connected, and maybe then that takes us to another project that starts happening.
But as you say, AB, before with your project in Chicago, this gallery week,
Chicago Exhibition Weekend,
weekend, question of durability is very important, and it's very something that, in a way, is new. We have to, especially for us as an institution, because we strive and we fight each year to get, you know, to close our budget for one exhibition. And there is this permanent renewal of things. And if we could have some more durability, that's what you do with this. You know, it's not only a one shot, it's something that creates, that takes time, consistency. And that is very important. And we have at stake to, in a way, get or go beyond this idea of what I call, with a little of humor and critical aspect, programmed obsolescence of the art and of the project. You know, you do one project and then, okay, it's over, you do another. No, we need durability. We need durability of the relation. That is why we have this project of Biennale, for example, that we would like to, the minister also asked us to do it. So something that Paris is missing now, because Art Basel is very strong toward the market, but maybe we miss a kind of more
non-commercial event
with all the institutions participating in collective. And also this idea called regeneration, which is the idea to invite patrons and partners, let's say partners, on the long term, making that something new, that not spending the fund or not making the project now, but ensuring that they could be made in the future. And I really love this idea, which is also paradoxical, but like permaculture institution is paradoxical. But paradox means also important thing that breaks the obvious, that is new, because this idea of how we can make the ground for a permanent renewal. So, meaning that to ensure that in 10 years, Palais de Tokyo will continue to renew. I don't know what will be the arts in 10 years. I don't know who will be running Palais de Tokyo, not me, because I have a mandate which is 8 years maximum.
Term limit, that's smart.
Terminate mandate. So I don't know. But you know, it's not very new. In the ancient time, people who were building the cathedrals knew that when they designed the cathedral, they will not see the end of the cathedral. Before, people were planting a tree, and they knew that the tree will grow when after their death, for the future generations. And this, in the last decades, we might have a little lost that. We lost a little this question of because of this immediacy. We forgot the idea if we plan things for the future.
And humility.
And humility,
We've lost
exactly.
humility.
We lost humility.
Humility in thinking that we're not going to live forever. Now you have people who are trying to live forever.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, I'll be here.
Yeah. But I'm afraid I won't be here.
I think it's good. We shouldn't live forever. That's crazy.
And you know what will be there? If we manage well, that the seed we have planted. So we have to believe in that. We have to believe in the future in the way. So in a way, there is a kind of spirit today of no future. You know. So either in a pessimistic thing or even I don't know what is the best, or blindness. Let's live in the present and we don't care. Or maybe thinking about we will live forever, which we know will be impossible.
No,
but then the idea of planting ground, and it is when you go in the past, you can also find partners in the past, you know, of those people who were just not thinking, creating for the future, not for the present.
Whose shoulders we stand on now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is so important, and so, in a way, falsely contradictory with contemporary art idea, because this is what I write in the Traité de Permaculture. At the beginning, I say there is a kind of idea which is maybe not wrong, but maybe misleading idea of the avant-gardes, saying that the avant-garde means in the beginning of 20th century, the avant-garde in modern art was that we do something and already we need something new, always something new. So, you know, the idea of permanent renewal, you know, creative destruction. So this idea was very linked to the idea of the avant-garde, but not of the arts, because at the end we know that it's keeping. We know it's very funny because there is a funny anecdote that in 20-something, 23, there were articles, I mean, 1 year after that the surrealist movement was created, they say, it's still there, we need something new. So, and you know, this idea of this newness, and this idea of ecology for me is not to be against innovation. I mean, I wouldn't work in contemporary art if I don't believe that there is a lot of things to create, but to imagine that in the structure we show, we have to preserve the permanency of this newness. And if we don't pay attention to that, we will lose everything.
Unfortunately, I think we have to.
That's the best place to end.
We might as well
That
end.
was poetic.
But I would like to say, I hope we can work together to find ways that we can work together.
Sure.
We're working together already.
Thank you, Abby, for taking the time. Thank you for Guillaume. And thank you for hosting Giving Back is Dead.
Thank you very much.
Be sure to check out our latest podcast and subscribe to Giving Back is Dead.